right, have and have not fans. Hope everyone's doing well. This is going to be my review for last night's episode, Season 8, Episode 3, entitled The Long Drive Home. I'm giving this episode a 7 out of 10. I do feel like this episode was better than last week's episode, which I still stand by what I stated. Last week's episode wasn't bad. It just felt like not a lot really happened, despite we saw a lot of characters moving from place to place. But this episode did what it was supposed to do. But if you look at my tweets, which once again I urge you, follow me on social media. Links are in the description below, specifically Instagram and Twitter above all else. If you only want to follow me on a couple of platforms, I do my best to watch the episodes live, live tweet. I hop on YouTube and do live streams, basically kind of like a rough draft, if you will, for this review, where as soon as the episode is over, I hop on a live and discuss it with the viewers and have the reviews up sometime Wednesday. Also, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button to show you like the video. Click subscribe, and also hit the bell icon and select all. That way you are notified whenever I post content to the channel. Now, I plan on doing a separate video, and I already feel like it's going to be demonetized based off the title, but it might be a title like, is Jim Cryer an elitist or a racist? Because that honestly was the biggest talking point of the episode. Now, let me put it this way. Remember last week, because I remember posting a video yesterday about this, and I'm glad I gave it a little bit of time before I actually posted the video right away. But I believe the title of it, I'm trying to pull it up on my phone now, and I asked the question, did Derek deserve Hannah's wrath? Basically talking about whether or not Hannah overreacted to how she dealt with being in Kathryn's house alone with Derek last week, you know, from pulling the knife, calling 911, and then him being arrested. And then in this week, we had a similar situation to an extent. This time it was two men, and the fact that, you know, Hannah whacked David upside the head, then the cops got called on her this time, and then she flipped the script by saying, okay, well, he didn't tell you the full story. They were the aggressors, and I'm the executor. So let me put it this way. The reason this episode doesn't get like a 8 or a 9, it wasn't getting a 10. Trust me, it wasn't getting a 10. Is the fact that I felt like this episode did suffer in some areas of needless padding, basically where you could tell Tyler was doing what he could just to fill up the 42 minute time slot, such as the whole Celine and Veronica scene where Veronica made her come in, basically go out of her house like multiple times, knock on the door, yada, yada, yada. I could just tell that it was Tyler, you know, running the clock until it was time to put on the end credits. But I think this episode truly suffered from the repetitive style of writing, not just with Tyler Perry, but in a lot of shows and movies, video games, comics. There are a lot of situations that could easily be handled if the individuals involved kept a cool head, because you had Jim literally running off at the mouth as soon as the episode started. It's like, instead of calmly asking Hannah what she was doing in the house, what was she looking at that paperwork for, basically Jim is like a 2-year, what do they call it? The troublesome twos or something like that, or basically when a toddler turns 2 years old and they say like that's like a terrible year or something, or the terrible twos, and then that's when a kid's going through their mind, the mind, this is mine, that phase of their life. That's basically Jim claiming what's his when he doesn't actually own a damn thing. So what I liked about David in this episode, and this is the one thing I'll give him, is the fact that he kept a cool, calm, and collected demeanor for the most part, and simply asked Hannah, hey, Hannah, could you explain what's going on? And Hannah calmly, well, I will talk to you since you're talking to me like I'm an actual human being. And basically, once again, Jim kept going off. And then that's when Hannah was about to pull a Marcy, and she pulled up like a fire poker, like she was going to whack Jim upside the head if he put hands on her and tried to take the documents from her. So from there, she goes downstairs. Jim is just going off at the mouth again, and David tries to calm his ass down because remember, the dude had been drinking a little and he was still kind of, a little loopy from the painkillers, and now he's trying to move all around when he shouldn't be because remember, David helped him upstairs last week. Now, this is the part that got me because there were a ton of inconsistencies with Jim throughout the entire episode. Number one, David kind of grabbed onto his arm, the one that's in the sling, and this dude started just crying in agony. Oh, David! Ah! And then you fast forward to a later point in the episode, right after David had called the cops, and Hannah. Oh God, there's so many things. Okay, I think I tweeted this out because there were just so many things about Jim that made no sense. Okay, so Jim 1 minute is crying in agony because David barely grazed his arm that's in the sling, and then after he makes it downstairs, don't worry, I'll get to that in a second. He tells Hannah, I'm pumped up with painkillers right now. You can whack me a few times for all I care. Wait, what? If you were doped up on painkillers, and why were you in agony when David grabbed your arm at the beginning of the episode? Also, when Jim was at the top of the stairs yelling down at David to get the paperwork, David, get the damn papers from her. I can't come down the stairs by myself. But then as soon as David called the police, Jim managed to walk down the stairs himself without any issue. And then another reason this episode just had me going, what is David said that, don't worry, there's Jim was like, David, there's a cop, are the police coming? Yes, there's a police car in the vicinity. They'll be here soon. And it was daylight outside. But then the cops did not show up until the ending of the episode when it was nighttime. Not to mention we had an entire scene where David, Jim, and Hannah were sitting in the living room area, and they had time for a lengthy conversation, and Hannah kept on working. So I'm like, where the hell are the police at? Okay, so let's just get back to the order of operations of the episode. So basically, when Hannah's going downstairs and David kind of goes after her, once again, he's calmly trying to ask Hannah what's going on. And I ain't gotta tell you nothing. True, she honestly doesn't need to tell him anything, but this is kind of like the same running gag with Hannah, because you go back to season 7, after Wyatt had broken into the house after escaping from the hospital to rob the place of jewelry and a car to get money for drugs. When Hannah went over there to get information on what was going on and she was walking out of the house, David went after her basically pleading for information. Hannah said no, and that's it. So that's pretty much the dynamic between the two. Now, then it gets to the point where, please don't make this get messy. Don't make this get ugly. And then basically it's like, David, what are you going to do? And then Hannah kept saying, it's like, fine, if you're going to take the papers, let me see you do it. And she basically grabbed the, the candlestick, challenging him to do it. And then he did. And from there, whack right across the face. Wait, am I bleeding? What's going on? Like I give a damn. I thought that was pretty funny. And then here's my thing about this. Jim wobbles down the stairs and basically, threatens her again. And then David tries to de-escalate the situation, even though he was the aggressor. And that's when David called the police. Hannah said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not even worried about it. So here's the thing about it. Even though this was a pretty interesting scene, and once again, I'm not saying Hannah was in the wrong at all, but I feel like this is kind of like last week's episode. It's the fact that a lot of things could have been settled by having a civil conversation. Jim was the one who just got the party started with all the, derogatory phrases and words he was calling Hannah. But at the same time, it's like, if Hannah would have at least showed David, and again, I know she didn't have to do anything, but I feel like this was just a waste of time. If Hannah would have either stated or just showed the paperwork that Kathryn had signed over the power of attorney and executor over to her, that would have shut them up quick. Now, Jim would have been speechless. He would have been ranting and raving. And I feel like if nothing else, he would have demanded David to get him to the jail to go see Kathryn face to face, because there was the point where David was talking with Hannah one-on-one, and Hannah's like, hey, I'm not going to tell you anything. What you need to do is tell Jim to go talk to his wife. And that's honestly the solid answer there. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of this confrontation did not even need to happen if Hannah would have just stated what was up. That's all I'm saying. And I totally get it. Like, her telling David would have made things easier. I can completely understand her not telling Jim, because Jim calling her out of her name and everything, I again, I completely understand it. It goes back to when David was trying to find Wyatt. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, well, Jim was having David try to find Wyatt, and apparently, he had stolen the car that, Hannah had changed the security code for. Thank you, Jesus. So, once Jim was trying to actually be civil, Hannah wasn't hearing it, and, Wyatt's life was in danger, like it is about 5 times every season. I know this is like a lengthy intro, but the rest of the episode I could just steamroll through. Don't worry about it. But then we get to, okay, I'll save the scene where Jim, Hannah, and David are talking in the living room. Trust and believe, that's good. Like I said, I'll do a full video talking about if Jim is an elitist or racist, but we go over to Celine and Veronica, pretty much yet another character who talks down to people, specifically minorities and whatnot, despite being one herself. But let me put it this way. I don't think Veronica was out of pocket because Celine was the one who was being not racist, but she was being very rude and not respecting another person's house. Like, you don't roll up in Veronica's house like that because, first of all, neither of you know each other that well. Secondly, you weren't invited in. You basically just knocked. Veronica answered the door and you just walked in and you started ranting. And it's like, first of all, calm down. So Veronica made her go out of the house, do it again, but then she came on in once again before she was fully, I guess you could say given permission to come in. But long story short, this happened a couple of times. Then she finally came in. She's whining about losing her job at the hospital, and Veronica's like, don't worry about it. If you want the job that badly, I can make a couple of calls to secure it, but just know that I'll handle it. And basically from there, Celine's like, fine, you know what? If you end up winning with Jim Cryer for me, I will come work for you as a maid for free. Because despite all of the derogatory, elitist, and, well, racist behavior in terms of her dialogue and the way she treats people, I feel like if nothing else, Jim comes off more as a racist and Veronica comes off as more of a elitist, turning her nose up at her own people most of the time as well. Or basically people below her. I feel like, like I said, I'll save it for another video. But she does give credit where credit's due, even though there's a lot of shade involved. I feel like, Veronica's going to give you 99.9% shade, but that point, 1% is a compliment, or a genuine, sincere compliment. She did take note of how well Celine, maintained the upkeep of the original Cryer estate. So she's like, fine, you know what? I think you do well if you work here. So once again, Celine's like, I will work here for free if you can win me this case against Jim. So moving forward, we go to Benny and Rihanna, and basically she thanks him for being concerned about her, issues about from yesterday. And long story short, there are a couple of houses that she is, she found for him to look at. He said, oh, great, I want to look at them as soon as possible. Long story short, there's a bit of flirtation between the two. And I feel like a lot of us call this as like, oh man, Benny and her might start, seeing each other. Then Sandy's going to find out, and then that's going to lead to some issues. And speaking of Sandy, he actually pops up later at the job, and he's just a little punk because of the fact that he can talk all big and bad to black people and women, but we've seen how much of a little B word he is when it comes to the family business of being family business, which got renewed for season 3, by the way. A punk he is when it comes to the family business that the Malones take care of. So you can talk all big and bad and demanding when it comes to women and black people, but at the same time, you can't handle shooting or cutting anybody. Sit your punk ass down, Sandy. And it's like Mitch kept telling us, like, dude, leave the girl alone. So he essentially makes it clear that Rihanna, it isn't over. You belong to me. And then it's like, what about the apartments, the cars and everything? Fine, I'll pay you back. And I'll admit, Ashley Miller's review, she pointed out something I didn't even think about. She's like, Rihanna, I'm not saying that, she isn't a victim in all this, but at the same time, she may have known what was up with Sandy, a guy just paying for all this stuff for you. And it's like, you should know what he's up to. And when that was mentioned in her review, I immediately thought about Esperanza from If Loving You Is Wrong when it came to Julius. Yeah. I don't know if she knew about him being in a cartel, but at the same time, Alex and Natalie, basically the girl group, pretty much knew that Esperanza had a history of dealing with bad boys. But yeah, I feel like Rihanna probably knew what was up and she tried to get out of the situation, but with Sandy being who he isn't going to let it go. Then a fellow coworker came in who I don't think we've ever seen this character before, but she is fine. She basically comes in to check on Rihanna. Once again, Sandy is being an ass, and she basically has Rihanna's back until, Rihanna's like, don't worry, I'm fine. So when Sandy eventually leaves, she comes back in stating, I believe this is either a coworker or maybe like a supervisor or something, because she explains that, look, anytime Sandy shows up, it makes the rest of the employees uncomfortable because of his demeanor and whatnot. So if he comes back again, I'm going to have to relocate you and you work from home. And, from there, it's like, hey, you need to like move out of the city. I tried to tell you before, and it's like, or call the police. I can't, the family has the police in the back pocket. So basically Rihanna is trying to handle the situation on her own, but she can't. And she even offers to give Rihanna a ride home. It's like, no, I need to take the long way home because he'll find out where I live, because Sandy was trying to get her address and everything, but Rihanna wasn't giving it up. So from there, we go over to the jail where it's Marty and Kathryn, basically telling Kathryn that Wyatt's doing well, but however, there's no bail given, and she might have to stay in jail until trial, which could be up to 2 months from now. And Kathryn essentially says, you're fired. I'll find somebody else who can help with the situation. And she says Veronica can do the job. She beats him all the time. And apparently Marty shoots that down because of the fact that he heard from the DA, I'm guessing George, who we haven't seen since the beginning of season 7. George, sorry, throat's dry, too much talking. George might call Veronica to be a witness in the Jennifer Salison murder, meaning that she would be off the table for representing Kathryn. So he urges Kathryn to like, hey, give me at least another day or so. There's one more judge I can talk to see what we can do. And Kathryn's like, fine, that's all you have. And I'm thinking to myself, Kathryn, I understand the frustration, but first of all, she's guilty as all hell. But at the same time, Marty is one of the few loyal employees in Kathryn's employ. I'd say Lloyd, the banker, is another loyal person. I think Lloyd and Marty are like, aside from Hannah as well, are the only people from, I guess you could say, Kathryn's payroll who follow Kathryn's instructions to a T. Because, was it Don and John, they're crooked accountants. Broderick works at the hotel. Broderick and Rocky, they both work at the hotel, running the prostitution ring and all that other stuff. So, and then Celine, well, we know why she was left in the employ of the Criers. But, yeah, Marty isn't able to get the bail. But at the same time, you should definitely keep those close to you who actually are trying to look out for you as opposed to those trying to use you. So, we also go back, speaking of Wyatt, Dr. Patton, she is a new character who is a therapist who essentially was doing some double talk with Wyatt. Essentially like, okay, I'm going to talk to you to see what's going on. Do you have any remorse about shooting your father? Because basically Wyatt's like, all I want are painkillers and, this and that. And obviously that wasn't going to happen. So she essentially does what's his name? And if Loving You Was Wrong has been off the air for a while, and I have not thought about that show in quite a while, so if I mess up the character names, forgive me. But wasn't the character's name Will, the cop who was trying to help out Kelly, and the one that said, hey, tell him you have chest pains, and if you do, you can go to the hospital to get out of jail. It felt like that kind of scenario where the doctor was like, hey, if you talk to me and if you say that you're in pain, then you can stay in the hospital. But if you aren't in any pain, then you're going right back to jail. So it felt like there was some double talk there where it's like, wait a minute, something ain't right here. Now, remember, my first instinct, oh shit, is she a Malone sent to finish the job? Or remember, David and Jim said that Wyatt needs to pay the consequences for shooting Jim. So this could be one of those little arrangements to teach Wyatt a lesson. That's what I think is the scenario. But long story short, they said, she's like, I'll be back tomorrow. We can start our, I guess you could say therapy sessions then. And also she brought up how, oh yeah, we're not going to let you out of these handcuffs and everything because the last time you did, you escaped. and there's a cop outside of your door. Well, there was a cop last time. Well, yeah, this one's going to do a better job taking care of you. Well, remember the last time Wyatt was in the hospital, he was giving all the nurses a hard time, not to mention that one nurse just kind of threw the piss cup at him. And then from there, the one cop did not give a damn. He was like, oh, you're going on a coffee break? Fine, I'll go too. So this cop left his station. So then when he took that pin from the nurse, he broke out of the handcuffs and somehow managed to escape the hospital and run all the way to Kathryn's house, steal the car and jewelry and whatnot, even though the alarms were going off before the cops showed up. And then that led to him going back to the Malone bar, and then he's back in the hospital again. So, the fact that there's a cop out there now, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, going to Benny once again, he actually goes over to the hotel room. Candace is laying in bed like she was the last time we saw her. And yeah, this is our first time seeing Candace this season. Essentially, I like this scene only because Mitch, who eventually shows up, and Candace are basically talking for the audience here when it comes to Benny. Look, we have one more day in the hotel and I'm staying. The fact that how I was conceived and I'm here now doesn't bother me, so it shouldn't bother you, Benny. And then Benny changes it about, what about the pregnancy test? Which raises a lot of questions, because was there some off-screen conversations we did not see? Because number one, how did Benny know about the pregnancy test? Number two, once again, was this an off-screen conversation where maybe Candace alluded to not feeling well, and then maybe Benny suggested the pregnancy test, and then she went to go get it, and then that's why Akil, who's been following Candace for Oliver, told Oliver that she hasn't been doing much of anything, staying in a hotel, hanging out with that Malone character, and she went to a pharmacy to get a pregnancy test. And I'm like, what? So there's that aspect of it. Then from there, let's see. Yeah, Candace takes note of Rihanna. I believe, like, I don't know, was that Benny's phone or was it Candace's phone that she held up and it looked like Rihanna was the background, or was she looking at an online profile? I don't know, but basically it's like, oh, is this the girl you're talking to? Wait, do you only want to get her help with finding a house because you want to have sex with her? And I found it kind of cute, but also kind of head scratching. Like, so Candace, after all the countless men you've slept with for whatever reason, you're grossed out by Benny talking about the one girl he might want to get with. And it's like, it was a cute scene because they're siblings, but at the same time, like, Candace, you certainly want to talk. So then Benny is doing something that a lot of characters often don't do, and that's like, hey, I want to change and shower. And it's like, wow, because we've seen you in the same outfit for countless episodes and you're about to clean up. So as soon as he's about to go into the restroom, we got Mitch coming in, and Benny sticks his head out the bathroom because he's still mad about, him lying about the information about Derek. And it's like, dude, get over it. So Candace is like, look, I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat. And it's like, what are you sticking around for? What are you doing? So basically Benny is back to asshole number one. And that was bad because when I was tweeting, I gave him praise. I'm like, the Benny we saw, the sweet, kind, understanding Benny in the scene with Rihanna, we haven't seen that Benny since like season 1, before the hit and run, before the coma, before he got off life support. So then he's back to being asshole again. But then Mitch puts him in his place, saying like, look, I'll respect my family's wishes. Like, if I were in your position when it came to finding out about, how one of my siblings was conceived and what this person did to my mother, and I feel like Mitch definitely follows the family code more than Benny does with the young family. So I feel like he wasn't just making stuff up when he was quote unquote taking sides. So when Benny went into the restroom again, Mitch is kind of, hey, just want to know if you're okay, Candace. That's all. We all know what he wants. We all know what he wants. Let's see what else we got here. Yes, I do know about the scene of Jim, Hannah, and David sitting in the living room. Let me cover the rest of the episode first. Oh, I'm sorry. My second page of notes, I missed out on this earlier. When Marty was telling Kathryn about how, don't worry, we've arranged it so there's no one who's going to be in the jail cell with you as a cellmate. We know, even though Marty says this and Marty arranged it, Mama Rose, the Malones have the police in their back pocket, or as Rihanna said, they're in bed with the police. Mama Rose suggested before she was taken out of jail, what if I get one of the family members of little Lizzie to be put in the same cell as you? Foreshadowing. All right, Marco goes over to see Veronica. Basically the same two-step with these two. Am I still being followed? Yes, you are. And Veronica asks about Colby, finds out he's an escort, and also asked to have him look into Tanner in order to meet with him tonight. Tanner is Justin's brother, and also she pretty much like, you know what, after everything is said and done, let me get your blood work and we could probably fool around. But the only interesting thing of note from this conversation is when Veronica's mentioning whether or not the person following her is aware that it's her, because this was alluding to whether or not Akil, the hitman, was able to tell the difference between Veronica and Laura dressed as Veronica. And then let's see here. That's pretty much it. So let's go back to the scene where it's Jim drinking, David sitting across from him, and then you have Hannah on the lengthy couch doing some more paperwork. And Jim is just running diarrhea of the mouth in terms of being, belittling Hannah, calling her a maid, calling her out of her name, calling her an it, and basically treating Hannah like Veronica treated Quita or Laquita in jail. What's this, ghetto? What the hell is this? Basically thinking she doesn't know what a portfolio is, just running on and on and on. And then David finally steps up. Jim, you're on the verge of being a racist. And I'm like, if David would have seen the playback from that scene from Mr. Jim, what was that, like the second or third episode of season 7? My goodness. I'm just sitting up here like, wow, David, you have no idea. No, it was like episode 6 or something, but it's like, once again, I'm doing a full video on this, and David's like, racist. Like, David, look, I sleep with women of all colors. I'm certainly many things. Elitist, yes, but not a racist. And that's kind of like the equivalent of a white friend telling the black friend, I'm not racist. You're my best friend, aren't you? You're not like them. That's essentially what it boils down to. But then Hannah puts him in his place by explaining, certain things about, the paperwork in front of her. Oh, the 4 businesses that you're trying to get Kathryn to sign off on, the ones that if you focused on specific areas of the community, you would have made back the 40% that you lost. And she is literally spouting out financial jargon, showing that her meeting or cram session with Al, along with all of her Google searches, have been paying off. And Jim sits back, you know what? You shut me up. And basically, you proved me wrong. And it's like, touche. But I think the scene itself was good in the fact that I love Hannah's just smirk on her face. And remember, this is Jim going off like, oh, I'm going to kill that daughter of hers. I'm going to kill that son. Oh, remember, that daughter took $8 million. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Oh, yeah, I'll kill anyone who gets him. Basically, Jim's spouting off the same nonsense for the past 3 or 4 seasons. And you all know how I feel about this money. But here's the thing. I don't mind it being mentioned in this episode because just based on the simple delivery of the dialogue, you can tell the characters are as tired about this damn storyline as we are. So I just love the fact that it's kind of brushed over like it's nothing. Oh yeah, remember that time she took that money from me? Yeah, like for like the 3rd time. So this was a good scene, but like I said, full video on it coming soon. And then the episode ends off with, like I said, the ridiculousness of the cop showing up at nighttime and basically saying that Hannah's under arrest. But then she basically says, well, did Judge Harrington tell you how he was the one that put his hands on me first? Wait, what? And then also she pulls out the paperwork and shows that she's the executor and has power of attorney, and the episode's in there with David and Jim speechless. So yeah, this was a interesting episode. Like I said, it had its ups and downs, but there were obvious signs of padding. And if Hannah would have, made it clear of her position early on, this would have prevented a lot of unnecessary confrontation. But obviously the clapback of her financial jargon to Jim was good. And I was tweeting this out. It's like, I feel like the only reason Hannah isn't saying anything is because of the shock value she wanted. She just wanted to see the look on her. Let's be real. Hannah is petty. She definitely only let things draw out the way they were for as long as it did, just to see the look on David and Jim's face when it was revealed that she's the executor and has power of attorney. That's all it boils down to, if you ask me. So with that being said, what did you think of the episode? Do you agree with my score 7 out of 10? Shout out to the patrons over on Patreon. You can donate for as little as $1 a month. Or if you just want to donate to the channel, feel free to do so on PayPal or Cash App. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.